have children, more than 3, which is another full-time job. I'm a blogger. I blog about travel internationally, pumping breast milk at the same time in order to be a mom and work these full-time jobs. I am the chairman of IDSA, but today I'm going to talk about my work, which is at the Nissan Mitsubishi Renault Alliance. We are the largest car conglomerate in the world now. We sell 10.6 million cars a year. We have 450,000 international employees. And as such, you know, the team that I work on is a very small team within this massive organization. So we are a 5-person cross-functional team. We represent 6 different disciplines, so design, engineering, business, urban planning, market research, and organizational change. We're also a global team, so even though we're 5 people, we're globally distributed across Japan, the United States, and France. We work in 4 different time zones. We work in 4 different languages. We also work in 4 different computing environments, which means we have no working global collaboration tools. And we're trying to grok a huge change in the industry. So we're trying to work through how automotive is moving into a new future. And what I'm here to talk about today is how we're doing that and how that's transformed our upstream product development process and our downstream prototyping process. And we can talk about motherhood later. So I bring to this cross-functional team a background in industrial design. I'm a student of Craig Vogel, so it's very weird to be going after him. And I bring an experience as an industrial designer working at a lot of different OEMs. So I've worked in consumer electronics, I've worked with semi-trucks, long-haul trucks, going long distances, I've worked with tractor companies, and I've worked a lot with car companies. All of these things are big, slow processes that require 5 to 10 years out of advanced planning. And what happened is that over the course of my career, I feel like I've seen the same thing happen a few different times now. And at first I thought it was me, and maybe I was just crazy and living through what they call in the US Groundhog Day, where you're like, I've seen this before, I've seen this before. And then I read this article in Harvard Business Review by Porter and Happelman. And this article made me realize that what I was experiencing was way beyond me. It was a macro trend, and it was essentially this graphic. And any product just wants to be a product company. Back in the day, we were all OEMs and we made products. Now what is changing is that the expectation is that our product is smart, which sounds simple. Step 2 is basically that product needs to connect to other things. It needs to know information about itself. So if you're making a tractor, your tractor should know how many rows it tilled that day. Once you have a smart product, you expect that that product becomes connected. So if it has all this information, I would like to access it on my iPad. When you access it on your iPad, the expectation is that, oh, it can obviously talk to all of the other pieces of farm equipment that I have. So all of a sudden, the expectation is more like a product system, that you as a tractor maker will be able to talk to the planters and the tillers and the harvesters and everything else that's going on the farm. Which means that even if you started out as a tractor maker, all of a sudden you're a farm equipment system manufacturer, which is a totally different mindset and a totally different system level than I think a lot of companies were originally intended to be part of. And the really complicated moment is when you get to the point where you're starting to think at a system level about the farm equipment system, and then the expectation is that if you are smart enough to know how many rows you tilled, and know how many things you planted, and knows how many things you harvested, you should obviously start working in the system of systems that drives the farm. So you should start knowing about the weather data systems, the seed optimization systems, the irrigation systems. And then this is what I've experienced a few times kind of brings this crisis about who we are as a company and where our competitive landscape is. So when you start thinking about the system of systems, you're like, all we wanted to do was make tractors, and all of a sudden we have to compete with all of these new types of companies, and we have to build all these weird partnerships, and some companies take it as a mission to like try to own the entire value chain, and other companies take it as a mission to retract back and say, no, we're just making tractors. leave us alone. But regardless, it just kind of creates this moment in the boardroom about this kind of strategic question of who are we, and what is our competitive set, and how much of a service company are we, and what parts of this value chain should we be trying to own or not. And so it comes down to this question of what is your system of interest. So the system of systems can get enormous. You know, you can start unpacking what we call boiling the ocean, so many different iterations of this. And so what we tried to define for ourselves was what is the system of interest that we feel like we can design for. And in the automotive context, we decided that that system was the city, because at a city level, you can actually design for a discrete set of stakeholders. It broadens the point of view beyond just being a car company, but it also limits the point of view down to a specific set of stakeholders that you can really understand the needs for and design for. And so we started studying systems. This font is so good. I'm really sorry. What we learned about the system of cities is that there's three kind of major things that are happening in cities. There's strong, huge, powerful centers, so they're growing. And the metropolis of the city is much broader and bigger than the individual city once was. So it's obvious here, but you can kind of see how one metropolis absorbs the next and absorbs the next, and all of a sudden you have this huge landmass. When you drive from Shanghai to Wuxi, it's almost entirely urbanized. You also see that cities are more polycentric. So this is the notion that there's no longer one downtown. If you're going from one side of Mumbai to another, you're basically just moving across any different part of the city. And mobility patterns look a lot more random because of that. The last thing is that cities are both the epicenters of sustainability in terms of problems and also potential solutions. We then compared the system of mobility to the system of the city. And the system of mobility has been well studied by two academics in the UK, Schaefer and Victor, and they've looked at 50 years of history of mobility. And they've looked at when you adopt a new type of mobility, what happens in that place. And what they found is that there's this lockstep growth of GDP with mobility. So the more GDP grows, the more mobility grows. The more miles per day every person in that place goes. What's interesting is that even though you add your mobility, you don't actually typically add to the amount of time that you spend moving. So if you have a high-speed rail, you're more apt to go further, but you're probably not more apt to go more than an hour and 1.2 hours a day. There seems to be some human limit with how long we will tolerate being on the move. And so what's interesting is that there's a consistency in how long we want to spend and how much money. And so typically we won't spend more than 10 to 15% of our household income on mobility. And so what's interesting is that there's these two constants that mobility really hasn't seen shifting in 50 years. So even with all of these new predictions of automation in the automotive industry and being able to hail a robotaxi tomorrow, we don't expect that you will actually spend more time or spend more money, but we do expect that you may go further and you may add more trips. So what we're looking for is these intersection points where the system of the city meshes with the system of mobility. And one very good example of this is parking. The image is very dark, but in LA, you can see there's a lot of buildings like this where the parking is underneath the building. And a lot of this comes from the expectation that any new building has to have a certain number of parking lots or parking spots. So the regulation around parking has actually transformed the architecture of the city. And if you think about a world where we might have smaller cars or more bicycles or more e-scooters, you could start to imagine that the architecture of the city would actually change to accommodate that. So there's this kind of what we would call a lever between the mobility industry and the urban planning industry, where if we can do something to help that system, it will actually have ricochet effects far beyond just automotive. So what's interesting about this has transformed our upstream process. It sounds very simple, but looking at it from a systems point of view changed all of the research that we do. So on the top half of this graph, you see what we used to do as a car company. We would take a car we would study the market. We'd say we want to build a convertible. We would do a segmentation of all the convertibles, and we would say we want to study convertibles for a specific segment. We'll say millennial women, right? And we would go out and do ethnographies with the millennial women. We would understand what they want and what they need and what kind of convertible they imagine driving. We would build a scenario or like a peak experience. So we would say millennial women really want to be driving on the Pacific Coast Highway with the top down and their wind in the hair, and they're really enjoying the success they've had of actually owning this convertible. We would distill that down into a singular concept that we would call something like Summer Every Day, where you have millennial encapsulating this essence of what it's like to be a millennial woman driving on this highway. What we've done with cities is we've taken that exact same methodology, but we changed all of the research. So when we did quantitative segmentation, instead of looking at convertible as a market, we looked at cities as a market, and we segmented different types of cities to say what's going on in mega cities, how are those cities unique from other types of cities in the world. Then we would pick a persona city, so like Jakarta, Indonesia, and we would pick a scenario that's specific to that city system, something like congestion. And what was interesting was it changed the types of concepts that came out. So instead of things like Summer Every Day, we were solving for congestion in Jakarta, which might not have anything to do with cars. And so the types of things that came out were like, maybe the best way to solve for congestion in Jakarta, these huge intersections downtown where everyone's riding a moped, is actually a helmet full of smart sensors, right? So that type of concept was the type of thing that we would have never thought of as a car company, that would have never been part of our ideation process, but because we studied the system of the city, instead of studying the system of the segment of an automotive market, we came up with entirely new ideas. And so then, if we were making a car, we would take this tight concept, like Summer Every Day, we would give it like a 2-word statement, we would give it a beautiful image, we would try to bring this to life. And so we would go through this process of developing a spec sheet. It's like an enormous Excel spreadsheet that makes your eyes bleed, and everybody argues for months about how that car should be positioned relative to everything else. So it would be target setting. You would be saying, it's got to be a little bit faster than this other competitive car, but a little bit slower. At what G-force, when it's going around this, should the steering angle be preparing for? We would basically be iterating through a series of prototypes or test mules where we would say, okay, what if we put a bigger engine in? So we hack apart a car and add an engine from another car. We would make one a little bit longer. We'd make one a little bit heavier. We basically would be trying out all these different iterations to hit this spec. And then once we had a prototype that we felt like was indicative of this future vision, we would roll it out as a concept car in a big public launch. And when we tried to do that for the helmet of sensors, we hit a very different roadblock. So what we did is we started out saying, okay, here's our helmet full of sensors. Let's start doing our target setting. Let's go look at what our competitors are doing and how they're making it. And so we started doing research about who else is making helmets, what do they look like. And it was funny because we were working with a very kind of lean, agile team that they call themselves a dev shop in California, where everyone was walking around in bare feet. And they were helping us through this process. And the woman that I was working with, named Alexa, was saying, you know what, we were looking at competitors and I was like, oh, they're making a helmet already full of sensors. And she said, I think it's fake. I said, what do you mean it's fake? It's online, you can buy it, it's a helmet, it's exactly what we're building. And she's like, no, it's fake, lots of things are fake. And I was like, what are you talking about? This looks so real to me. And so what was interesting is she took me on this tour of all of the things that she thought were fake online. And she took me through this really interesting view of the internet that I'd never seen before, that's coming from an agile perspective, where things like Zappos, the shoe company, never had a warehouse, they just had a website. So when they first started, they literally just had a website that sold you shoes, and if you ordered shoes from their website, they would run to a shoe store, buy shoes, and fulfill the order. So they basically created what in her mind was like a fake website of a shoe company that didn't exist until they had enough business to actually fulfill the shoe orders that they were getting. Google is a good example of this. Google started a fake company called Dr. Fork, that's a pizza company that they put on YouTube. It gets 20 million impressions, and they use it just to test had copy. So they test like, is it better to have a man in the picture with the pizza or just the pizza by itself? Is it good to have the zoom in of the pizza gooey, or is it good to have the pizza at a, from a faraway view? And so it's literally just A/B testing ads, but it's not using the Google brand, and it's creating this like, and you can't order, like if you click, yes, I would like to order pizza, it's like, oh, sorry, we don't have pizza right now, but it's a fake company. There's no pizza at all. And so it was interesting because it just made me rethink this whole process and understand for the first time really what lean was and what agile looks like in the product development process. So the way that you would do the helmet full of sensors in this new age version is that you would not go through the process of building out the spec sheet. You would actually put a landing page up online that shows the helmet, as Alexis would say, a fake website that says, buy the helmet now for this price with these features. And if you get enough orders, there's this threshold at which all of a sudden it makes sense to actually build the helmet that you've been promising to build. So you can learn through what people order, whether or not you should actually create it. And then you basically scale up the fidelity of the prototype over time. And so what this means as an OEM is that you're literally selling prototypes to people before you've made them, right? And so I started looking at my own life, and I had this new view that Alexa gave me about prototypes, and the idea that there was a lot of things that were getting built and sold as prototypes that I had assumed were real products. And when I started looking at my own life, it was really amazing to see how many things I had bought that were in fact prototypes. One example is from Kickstarter. This is a book called Good Night Stories for Rebel Girls. This is my 3-year-old daughter who loves this story. And I bought the book before it was ever written, right? And so this is an example of the authors had decided this might be something people are interested in. And once they got enough Kickstarter orders, they hired the illustrators, they wrote the story, they published the book. Now there's a beautiful podcast. There's a whole, like, this has become a brand, right? But when I purchased it, it didn't exist, right? It was a fake thing that they sold me on the idea of. And then once they had the sales, they actually generated the prototypes and brought those to life. For books and music, I think it's pretty simple. But when you start thinking about products, it's a little bit different. This is another thing that we bought in Kickstarter. This is a coffee pot. And the idea is that this is a pour-over coffee pot with a metal filter. And it has two parts, so you can pour it over and then you can use the base to pour your coffee. And we've used it for 7 years, right? And I never thought about this as a prototype. I was just like, oh, this is our coffee pot. But when I went back and started looking at it as a prototype, I realized that it really is a prototype. There's all sorts of problems with this product. The metal filter doesn't actually work. We still use a redundant paper filter to pour the drip coffee through because it was too gritty with just the metal filter. It's also cracking. You also see where the rubber edge is starting to tear away from the ceramic. It's chipping everywhere. It's kind of a terrible, like, stage 1 prototype that I've been using for 7 years as my coffee pot, and I never even thought to rethink about it. And I went back to the company, and I've seen now that they have done iteration 3 and 4 and 5, and now they have this really beautiful coffee pot that I should buy, because it's the thing, it's the vision that I was originally trying to buy 7 years ago, but I never went back to even see how they brought that to life further. Another example is the Naya breast pump. So my 2 daughters were split up in age by 2 years. But what happened between the time that I had my first daughter and my second daughter is that MIT had a hackathon called Make the Breast Pump Not Suck. And after that hackathon, there has been a proliferation of investment and development in breast pump technology. And there's been a huge outpouring of new startups in the Silicon Valley building breast pumps. But what's interesting is they're all kind of prototypes, right? You buy them, and then you realize, like this, yeah, that they're not really finished, right? So this is the machined edge that actually goes against your body when you're pumping, and you can see it's not very well machined, right? It's not a smooth edge. But what's interesting is that this is a $1,200 prototype. So this is a very expensive thing that's not returnable, that you buy once, that as a customer, you're kind of buying as a finished thing, even though in reality it literally comes with a note that says, you know, we're a startup, we're working on it, thanks for trusting us. You know, and they basically say, like, you bought a prototype even though it was very expensive. And so it comes to this question of, like, how willing are we as consumers to be part of this process, right? And how far can you go down the line of making something that's really still too rough as a prototype and get away with selling it and people not get frustrated by it? An example of that is something else that we run on Kickstarter that was super frustrating right out of the box, which was a smart home blind mover, where it was supposed to take your blinds and open them up in the morning and then close them at night automatically. But as you can see, it's like this terribly 3D printed, really hacky prototype that doesn't work at all. So the moment that we took it out of the box, we're like, oh, like we just wasted the money on this. And we, you know, got rid of it. And Kickstarter is trying to deal with this. So they've created these new rules that you can't sell something based on a rendering, you have to sell something based on a prototype. But as industrial designers, we all know that making a prototype look really good is just as easy as making a rendering look really good, so it doesn't really deal with the problem. But it is a question of, like, fidelity. Like, what point of fidelity can you start to bring to market to really start to get this type of feedback and work in this agile way? And so at work, we created what we call the spectrum of fidelity, where before it was always that you would take something really rough and make it really fine. This is not new. What's different is that before, all of this was done in secret, and you wouldn't actually show it to the consumer until it was finished. Now there's a vertical axis, and the vertical axis is basically customer satisfaction. And because you're showing customers products way sooner, you're going through this process of managing customer expectation along the way. And we think the ideal path is somewhere along this blue path, where you're getting a lot of feedback, you're making mistakes, you're making people angry, but you're never making them too angry, right? To me, the breast pump that's $1,200 makes people a little bit too angry, and they're probably not going to recommend you in the future. But if you can kind of, like, undulate across the center, where people are pretty happy, but maybe a little bit mad, but they'll stick with you, and then as you get more and more refined, you move into the upper right quadrant, it really starts to work. And so the way that we started developing this at work was what we call living labs. And living labs are a way for a car company to do these types of experiments where we're actually testing a whole system, but we're trying to test in a way that doesn't hurt the brand. If we launch a service and people say, oh, Nissan failed at making the service, that's automotive news, right? We're trying to make safe ways where we can experiment in the real world with people, trying to balance the sense of customer satisfaction with fidelity of prototyping in a way that tests hardware, service, system, and or hardware, software, service, and system together. So a couple of examples. This is a collaboration that we did with a company in San Francisco called Scoot Networks. We took the Renault Twizy, which is a tandem two-seater electric vehicle, and we put it into a scooter sharing service. So the idea was that you don't have to wear a helmet, you don't have to have a motorcycle license, but you can still use this station-based service to get across the city of San Francisco. What this helped us do is study the hardware. Does this type of micromobility solution work in a city like that? It also helped us to test the system and some of the constraints that the city was having. So we did a lot of collaboration with the city, and their biggest concern in San Francisco is about parking. And they have not been able to allocate enough parking to these new mobility services because they already have parking constraints as a city. And so you can park 4 of these because they can park perpendicularly to the curb. You can park 4 of these in the space that you can park 1 car. So by testing how much more parking you can garner from a single service like this, we were also able to test what does that do for their mobility services and their parking issues as a city. And lastly, it allowed us to test software and service using Scoot Networks platform. You can see that you can rent either a scooter in the gray or a quad, which is what they call this 4-wheel vehicle, in the red. And so it allowed us to kind of immerse in what this service system would look like without actually having to build out this entire digital product ourselves. Okay? Another example that's a little bit more hacky was we sold an early prototype of the idea idea of sharing a car with someone else. And we didn't have an app yet, so we tried to get ways that people could share the car together without having all the digital technology that they needed. They had trouble swapping the car in parking lots, so we literally gave them these road cones and told them to put it on the top of the car so that the other person could see it. We looked at the hacks and workarounds that they were coming up with, so we built these basically texting bots that would say, hey, your car's available or your car's not available, and then we would see how they would, what information they would try to give each other about the exchange. So here's where the car is, here's how full the tank of gas is, and they would basically we would try to learn from what they were doing, and then we took all of the things that we learned, and we built that into an app. So instead of building the app first, we started without any app, gave them cards, tried to see how they did it, and then we learned what the actual needs were, and we were able to then build the app better after that. Where we didn't have a solution, we used off-the-shelf products. So we didn't have, in our app, build out all the features that we wanted. So we used Splitwise, which is an app that they use for sharing a house. So if you're sharing a house and you want to share the gas price and the rental price with somebody else, this helps you split it up. So we were able to actually put the Nissan cars on the platform and allow people to split up some of the costs that they couldn't split in our own app. It also helped us figure out if we needed to build those features ourselves. And so basically, there's 4 things that we think make a good living lab. It's time-bound or seasonal. Uber is really good at this, where they say, we're going to deliver Christmas trees. Christmas trees, you know, might not be available in February. So when they stop delivering Christmas trees, nobody bats an eye, right? Or they say, we're going to start delivering ice cream. And in the summer, when the summer ends and they stop delivering ice cream, nobody bats an eye. So the more seasonal you can make an experiment, the better, because it automatically has a close date, and it doesn't mean that you're failing, it's just the season ended, and you're going on to the next experiment. Another thing that we think is really helpful is a lengthy amount of time. So we're so used to doing concept testing where we give people 2 hours of exposure to our product, but being able to actually give someone a month or 6 months to live with the product and live with it as a prototype, we've learned so much more. The third thing is that it's real and that people are paying to participate. So we're also very used to market research where we pay people for their feedback. In this case, we are trying to adopt this methodology of selling a prototype. If it's good enough that people are willing to pay even a little bit for it, it helps change the expectation around what they're trying to get. And then the last thing is that you have partners or other system stakeholders like cities or software partners that are helping to bring a broader perspective to whatever it is that you're prototyping. And for us, this has really changed our entire process. This is the way we used to do it. We would have engineers and designers from all over the world literally staring at competitive cars, trying to fit in luggage, trying to argue about specs, but none of this was in the real world. This was at a Nissan facility, and we would be doing it with each other, all in theory. And now we have someone riding in this car for 6 months, and we see what kinds of things they carry. We gather data about that experience, and the way that we do it is much more real-time, real-world, and with real